So a very hearty good evening to all of you present over here. My name is Ashish Kashyap, and today is the day 3 of the ongoing Web Dev Week that's been currently being conducted by the GDSC IIIT Bhopal Club. Today we have Prashant Pandey from third year as our speaker, and he would take a session on getting started with Nodejs and Express today. So please to attend today's session with great enthusiasm and zeal. And please don't forget that at the end of today's session, we would conduct a quiz. Uh, and that quiz would be the first quiz. And that would be based on the last 2 sessions that we conducted. And the top 3 winners of those quiz would be awarded with GDSC t-shirts, right? So please don't miss that quiz. And so without any further ado, let's hand over to Prashant. And Prashant, you can start the session.
Hello everyone, and thanks Sashi for that wonderful introduction. So just to be clear, I'll give a short introduction about myself. So hi, I'm Prashant Pandey. I'm from third year EC branch, and today I'll be presenting you guys an introduction to Node.js and ExpressJs. So I won't be going much deeper into the internal working of Node.js and ExpressJs because it's currently out of scope of this session. But yeah, you will learn how you can create a server using Node and Express, and where the difference lies when you create using a library like Express and without using a library like Express. Because Node.js in itself is quite a big ecosystem, and learning everything about it won't be feasible in 1 hour. So we'll only be skimming over over the top of this Node.js, and that's what's going to be like that will be the topic for today's session. So I'll start the session with with a short introduction about Node.js. So what is Node.js? If you go by the definition that you find on Google or maybe the official website of Node.js, it says that Node.js is an open source cross-platform backend JavaScript runtime environment that runs on the V8 engine and executes JavaScript code outside a web browser. So there are few words that can fully define what Node.js is, like backend JavaScript runtime environment and cross-platform. So if you simply put it, it's an environment where you can run JavaScript code. If you had attended yesterday's session, then you might be knowing that in order to run JavaScript code, you need to have a browser. Before the introduction of before Node.js came into the picture, we could only run JavaScript code in a browser because nothing was invented so that we could run it outside the browser. So that is why Node.js was created. The main purpose of it was to so that we could use JavaScript outside a browser, and we could use it for more than just manipulating DOM elements. So that's why what Node.js was created, and that is what it is. It is based on the V8 engine that is a part of the Chrome. So what V8 engine is, it is the main, it is the core that helps us to run JavaScript code in Chrome. It is the main part that runs JavaScript code. This is the part present in Chrome, and every other browser has its own this engine, JavaScript engine, that helps it to run JavaScript code. For example, I think in Safari, it's something like Monkey or something. It's called something like that. I don't remember the name correctly, but that's what it is, a JavaScript engine. And yeah, that's a short introduction on Node.js. So why do we need Node.js? Like as I mentioned earlier, before the creation of Node.js, we could run JavaScript code only inside a browser. It was only limited to website and HTML pages. If you create a front-end website, the front-end part of a website, you will be using JavaScript in order to manipulate the elements, the tags, or something like that. This was the only purpose of JavaScript before Node.js. But after Node.js was built, we could write code that could run servers on the backend, and much more than that, we can also write apps using React Native. So it kind of opened Node.js opened doors to a lot of opportunities for JavaScript developers, and it's currently the main player in the market when it comes to multi-purpose languages. So yeah, it kind of helped us to use JavaScript in more than one ways. So Node.js is not the only web framework present, on the web. There are other frameworks like Django and ASP.NET, and yeah, like it's not the only competitor there. But Node.js in itself is quite different from other frameworks like Django and ASP.NET. For example, like if you go on the official website of Node.js, you can find this line: Node.js is an event-driven, single-threaded, and asynchronous web framework. So event-driven, single-threaded, and asynchronous web framework. These are like these three words kind of define the main properties of Node.js, why it's so good at handling a huge load on the backend, and like these three properties also makes it different from other web frameworks. For example, web frameworks like Django and ASP.NET are multi-threaded frameworks, whereas Node.js is single-threaded. So like if you want to know what you like what's the difference between single-threaded and multi-threaded, so here for example Node.js, this is the, you can consider it the backend, this box, and there's only one thread. So you can think of threads as the hands, the hands that human beings have. If you have only like one hand, then you can only do one job at a time. But if you have two hands, then you can maybe do like two things at a time, like pick two cups at once. So that's what thread is. It's like processes. When Node.js is running on the backend, it's called a process. So each like one process can have multiple threads, but Node.js was designed to have only single thread so that it could handle use load. We'll learn how it helps it to like handle use load, but that's what Node.js is. It is single threaded, and it kinds of like accepts request one after the other. First it's going to accept the request 1, then request 2, followed by 3 and 4. It won't be accepting like after accepting request 1, it won't proceed to the next request until it's done with request 1. And if we come to Django or other frameworks like which are multi-threaded, then they have more than one thread. So what they can do is that maybe like at the same time, Django, the backend that is written in Django, it can process request 1 as well as request 2 at the same time. It doesn't have to complete request 1 in order to go to request 2. So here Django can be thought of as a person who has three hands, just to say, and it has three hands, and it can do like multiple work at the same time, like it can process multiple requests. So that's what a multi-threaded framework is. And it kinds of like you might be thinking that multi-threaded frameworks like are quite like they're good in handling used load because they can do multiple, they can process multiple requests at the same time. But there's a there's a catch in this. Like when a server is running on a system somewhere in the world, it's running on a system. For example, I'm running a Django server on my laptop. So every processor, like I have a i3, or I don't know, it's i5 core processor. So every processor has like it has a capacity, like how many threads it can how many threads it can create. So it's not like I can create 100 or 1,000 threads on my laptop. That's not what like how it works. There's a upper threshold, how many threads you can create. So for example, once for example I send very bulky request to this Django server that is running on my laptop, and my laptop can only create 3 threads. So once these 3 threads are busy with the first 3 requests that are very bulky, and it's going to take for example 10 seconds or maybe 20 seconds to process each request. So my laptop doesn't have any more threads in order to accept request 4 and 5. So what it's going to do is that it's going to drop the request 4 and 5, because it's still busy with the first 3 requests. And once a thread becomes free after it's done with processing, then only it can move to the next request. So that's a big disadvantage of multi-threaded frameworks, is that it can't once all the threads are busy at the same time, the backend has to drop some requests, so because it can't process any more threads. And that doesn't happen with Node.js, although it's a single threaded framework. That doesn't happen with Node.js, and we'll learn how. The like I can tell you that it's because it is asynchronous. So this is the property that helps it to process more requests. Although in spite of being single threaded, it can process more requests than a multi-thread framework. So we know what single threaded means, and why how it's different from other frameworks. and I have like give you a short like note on what asynchronous is. We'll learn more about it in the like coming slides. And to tell you about what event driven is, that you can think of event like event is anything that happens in the code, or no, not the code, like on the server. For example, if a request comes to the backend, so that's an event. If you fetch if you receive data from the database, that's an event. So anything that happens on the backend, it's an event. So Node.js is an event driven network. Like what I mean by that is that everything in Node.js happens because of an event. When a Node.js will start accepting like it will start processing and request when it receives a request, that's an event, and that event is going to trigger some code that will process that request. So that's what event driven is. It's simply like something that happens, and that's how Node.js works. I'll show you like more, like I'll show you how it happens in the backend. I'll show you how Node.js processes, the body of a request, and then maybe you'll have a clear idea of what event driven is. But for now, these three are the main properties of Node.js: event-driven, single-threaded, and asynchronous web framework. So you guys might have already downloaded Node.js. Ashish must have told you about this in yesterday's session. So if you guys have it, then no problem, or else you can download it from here. I'll share you the link. Ashish.
Yes, I'm sharing that.
So Ashish will share the link in the chat box, and then maybe you can download it from there if you haven't. So now we move on to the topics that we'll be covering in Node.js. So first I'll be, like writing some, I'll be coding a simple backend that will help you to like learn more about this Node.js. We won't be using any libraries here. We will just be using pure Node.js and the modules that are already available with Node.js, so that you can have a clear idea of where the difference lies when you use a library. When you use a library and when you don't use a library. So that's you'll learn. That's how you will learn the main difference between these two things. So like how can we run JavaScript code using Node.js? As I told you that before Node.js, we could only use the browser to run JavaScript code. But once we had this Node.js, we could write commands and use the node command in order to run JavaScript code. So I'll show you a simple example. And using Node.js, you can run JavaScript code using two methods. One is the node REPL. REPL means read, evaluate, print, and loop. It's similar to the Python terminal. I think I don't know what it's called, but even in Python you have that that terminal. When you type the Python command, you can type a command and press enter, and it will show you the output. Then again you can type another command, and that's how it works. It reads the input given to it, it evaluates it, it prints the output. If there's like, if it has to print, like for example, if you assign a variable with some value, it won't print anything because it doesn't have to do anything there. But if it has to print something, then it will print it, and it will loop again to read, evaluate, and print. So that's what node REPL is. And another way that you can which you can use to run JavaScript code is using the node commands followed by the file path or the file name. So I'll show you both of these ways now. So first we'll go with the node REPL. So you guys must be familiar with all these, like a console, what console.log is, all these things, because you must have attended yesterday's session. So what console.log does is it only prints the value passed to it. So that's what it's going to do. It's going to print hello world, and we can even like assign values to variables here. Example, if I assign the value 5 to variable a, it won't print anything now because it doesn't have to. It doesn't need to print anything now, and here it prints the value of a that was assigned the value that was assigned to a. So this is how we can use the node REPL to to run JavaScript code. We can do like much more than this, but it's just I wanted to show you that you can run code the JavaScript code using this. So now we'll use the node command followed by the file name in order to run JavaScript code. So I'll create a starting file index.js. So I've just type console.log hello world. It's going to give the same output as it did in the node REPL. So in order to run this file index.js, we are already in the folder which contains this file. So all we have to do is we have to type node followed by the file name, and it's going to print the output that is supposed to that we are supposed to have for the code that is written in this file. So like we can also do like much more than that. I'll show you, but this is just in order to show you how this works, how you can run JavaScript code using the node REPL and the node command. So now we'll be moving to a lot advanced topics, like not advanced topic, but the topics which are important in order to become very good at using Node.js and making good backend servers. So the first topic that we'll be covering is modules. So like many of you might be familiar with this term modules. Like in Node.js, modules is nothing like it's not rocket science to understand that it means files that contain code. So modules in JavaScript can be are files that contain code and which can be imported or exported. By imported means that, for example, you have a file that contains some code and you need this code in another file. So we can import, or we can bring we can use this code in the file that we want by importing that module. And in a similar way, if we want to import this file, we also need to export it from the current file. I'll show you I'll show you an example, and then you might be able to understand it better. So for example, this file it's a module, and currently it does not have any like code. So what I'll do is that I'll create a function. So here we have some code in this another.js file, and it's simple. It doesn't do anything big. All it does is that prints a statement. So now if we want to if we want to use this code in the index.js file, so what we have to do is that first we have to export, or make it available to other files. So in order to do that, we have to type the command module dot exports equals to the function name. So this is how we can make a file, or some function or code available to other files. So here I have exported this function from another.js. You don't have to know how this module.export works or what this is. Since it's just a small introduction to Node.js, you can just learn this line that module.exports equals to some function. It exports this function from this file. And now if we want to use this file in this index.js, we have to import it. So in order to import files, we have to type the command okay. So what I've done here is that I have wrote this line const another equals to require another, the file name of the name of the file. So require here helps us to import functions, or modules. It's like you can just learn this line require and this modulo exports, because because that's what it does. Modulo exports functions, and require imports functions. here in this bracket we have to mention the name of the file or maybe the library that we want to import. Like we are currently only importing files, so it's not important here, but you have to mention the name of the path of that file that you want to import, and you also have to assign it to a variable. So I have assigned this another with the function imported from here. So theoretically this function one should be equal, another should be equal to the function one. So if I call this another function, I should expect the output that I would have received if I had run this function one. So as you saw that this is how we can import functions from one file to another, and it kinds of like helps us to increase the modularity of your code, because if you wanted to have this function in if you wanted to write this function in 10 files, so you have, if you did not use this import and export method, then you have to write this 10 times. But now since we're using this module.exports way, we can just write it one like at one place and then import it in all those 10 files. And you can, and it's not limited to only one function, you can have multiple function in this file. So here I created another function, and if now if we want to have like multiple, if we want to export multiple functions from a file, what we have to do is that we have to put them in between curly braces. So I'll put both the functions func1 and func2 in these curly braces, and now here, since I have I have imported this file which has two functions. So now if I want to call the function 2, all I have to do is I have to write the code another dot func2, because what we're doing here is that is that we are exporting uh, an object. Okay, if you guys know what an if you guys don't know what an object is, it is simply like a dictionary in Python. You have a dictionary in Python, for example. So this is what an object is. It's like it's the same thing like here. We are exporting an object from here, and in order to like for example in this const object, if I want to access the first, like the first variable, then I have to dot first. So this is how I can I can access the first variable in object. So this is how objects work. It was just a short glimpse about objects. So this is how we can like export multiple functions or multiple variables. You can export anything ranging from functions to variables, and that's how. Now if I run this code, then I should see the output from func2. Hello world from module another .js from func2. So yeah, this is what modules were, and this was just short introduction to modules and how you can import and export functions. Now moving on to callback functions. So yeah, so callback function, it's kind of quite a heavy topic, but it's not like very hard to understand. Like in short, a callback function is just a function that is passed as a parameter to another function. Okay, that's what a callback function is. It is just a function that we pass as a parameter to another function. So for example, if another function. So I have now modified this func1 function in order to accept a function as a parameter. This another function is a parameter that will be passing in index.js, and here I am calling that same function in func1. So So what I've done here is that I created this another function here in index.js and I passed it as a parameter to func1. So here func1 is going to receive this function and it's going to call it. So we should say this output from another function on the terminal. Yeah, it works. So this is what callback function is. Another function is a callback function here. Like it's nothing advanced, but this is what a callback function is. It's simply a function that we pass as a parameter to another function. We'll be like seeing how it like where we use it when we write a backend like a simple server in Node.js. So like you won't be able to pass function in every code. Like you won't be able to pass functions as a parameter in C++. But here it happens in JavaScript because JavaScript considers function as a first class citizens. By first class citizens, I mean is that functions can be treated as values. It can be assigned to like another variables, or it can be passed as parameters to another functions. You can't assign a function as a value to a variable in C++, but you can do that here. So now we come to asynchronous. Like it was a major property of Node.js asynchronous framework, and we'll be learning what asynchronous is here. So in simple, asynchronous code is a portion of code which does not execute one after the another. So like for example, so if I run this file now, then you should see first printed first and then second. So so this is a synchronous code. This part of code is a synchronous code, but asynchronous means that like the code won't be executed one after the another. Maybe a part of the code takes more time to execute, so it's going to be like it's going to be processed in the backend, and once it's done, its value will be printed on the terminal. So in order to give you a small glimpse of what asynchronous code looks like, what I'll do here is that set timeout. So set timeout is a function that helps us to you know to execute a function or something like any code after a set interval of time. Yeah. So set timeout helps us to execute a piece of code after set interval of time. For example, I want to execute this another function after 1000 milliseconds. This value is it's written in milliseconds, so it's going to maybe we should use 3 milliseconds, 3000 milliseconds. So it's going to call this another function after 3000 milliseconds, which means 3 seconds. So okay. So here yeah, I haven't like changed anything, but all I've done is that I've placed this first the command which prints first before this, and I call this function one, and the second after it's done processing this. So in synchronous code we should expect first followed by this output from another function, and then second. But in order to show you what asynchronous code is, I have in the set timeout. Yeah. So as you saw, the first we received first, then second, followed by from another function. So this is what asynchronous code is. It simply it is not executed one after the another. This is the most basic example of asynchronous that you can have. I have just used this set and a set timeout function in order to put a difference between the execution of the code. So if anyone has any questions up till here, you can ask.
Tanav, can you unmute their mics?
Yes.
Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, can you explain asynchronous again?
Yeah, so like asynchronous is a part of code that is not executed one after the other. So before this function was there, before like before you saw that first we had this console.log first followed by console.log second. Like even if I remove this part. So as you saw that it was like executed one after the other, first, third, and second. But if I include this function one, so theoretically we should have first, third, followed by the output of this function, which is from another function, and then second. But this did not happen because I included this set timeout, which delays the calling of a code, like, execution of a code for that milliseconds that you mentioned here. So that is why if now I run this code, I have first, third, second, followed by from another function. So it wasn't like one after the other. This was executed a bit late because I have mentioned at 3000 milliseconds. So this is what asynchronous code is. This is just an example of what asynchronous is, and that's what it does.
Okay, sir. Got it.
So moving on. Promises. So I don't think I'll be like explaining you guys promises here because it's maybe it's going to take a lot of time. If I have time remaining in the end, maybe I'll explain to you guys there. So now we'll be having like a short introduction to Node like npm and ExpressJs. Okay, like till now we had been running code using only pure Node, and like we haven't used any external libraries or something like that. All we did was that we had created these two files, and we used the Node command in order to run JavaScript code. So what I'm going to do now is that so yeah. So like the Node.js ecosystem is quite big, and there will be times there where you have to where you have to write some code, or maybe create a server, like create something that is quite exceptional, and you don't know like how to create that. So there, but maybe maybe someone else has done that, and you want to use that code in your project. So what Node did was that it created an online repository for libraries, and it's called the Node Package Manager. It is a place where people who create libraries, or they create something exceptional that maybe you can use it, maybe something that you have to use more than 1,000 times in your code. So that's and people have created code for that. They simply like post this library on the Node Package Manager website. It's called, the official website is npmjs.com. So this is simply a place where you can host your libraries, and other developers or people can simply download that libraries and use it in your code. So that is what npm is. It's simply, you can think of it as the GitHub for Node libraries. Okay, the libraries written in JavaScript. So if you want to use like if you want to set up a project for in which you can use the npm libraries, what you have to do is that you have to create to like you have to run a command that is going to create a bunch of files for you, and these files are mainly used used to track the libraries or maybe anything that you pull from npm the node package manager website. So in order to set up a website using npm, all you have to do is you have to run the command npm init. So after you run this command, you will be prompted to input a bunch of values. For example, what you want to name this package or the project. So I can just name it GDSC, and the version I can leave it to 1.0.0. Description index one plus. You can just press enter, like it won't matter much. This is just for the metadata of your project. So as you can see, we now have a file package.json. So this package.json was, I did not create this file, it was created by npm in order to track the libraries that you install for your project, and it also contains some dummy metadata for your project, like the name of your project, the version, description if it has one, the main. So this main value indicates the entry file of your project. For example, I want my I want the my project to start executing from this index.js file. So node will always call this index.js file first, and then from here it kind of moves to other files. Like if other functions are called from this file, then they will be executed. But first, it's only going to call this index.js file. So that's what it is. And scripts, author, and license. Like I'll show you what scripts stand for. For example, like till now we have been using the node command followed by the name of the file in order to run the the code present there. But now what we can do is we can define our own scripts. Okay, like for example, I have defined a script start that like if I call this variable start, then what it's going to do is that it's going to execute this command. This is the same command that I've been using till now in order to execute the code present in the index.js file. So like it's nothing very advanced, but that's what it does. If I type npm followed by the variable, like the name of the script that I have defined there, that is start. So what it will do is that if I now execute this command, it's going to execute node index.js. Yeah, it's the same thing, like it's nothing rocket science. So that's what scripts are. It's simply you can define your own commands that you want to execute. So when I typed the npm init command, two files were supposed to be created. The second file, which is package-lock.json, will be created when I install a library. So I already showed you the package.json file, like what it does and what information it contains about your project. So yeah, now moving on. Package. Yeah. So I'll show you now how to install packages using the npm command. So this session is going to be an introduction to ExpressJs. ExpressJs is a library that that is hosted on npm. So we can also install ExpressJs using these using npm. So now if I want to install the Express library in my project, then all I have to do is type npm install followed by the name of the library. So it's called Express. Yeah, so now I should have Express in my project. Now you can see like another file which is package-lock.json was created. So like you can think of it as an advanced version of package.json. In package.json you have only the the version number of the library that you've installed. The dependencies contains the libraries that you've installed till now, and So it has this express and the version number that I've installed. But in package-lock.json, you are going to have like all the sub dependencies of express. So express, I've installed this version of express, and all this information contains the dependencies that express has, and it also has to install those. So you don't have to you don't have to worry about this file, because you won't be using in your when you code. But it was just a short introduction to this. And the node modules actually contains the code of that library. So this here is the code of ExpressJs. So now we'll be creating a simple backend server using Express. So as I had showed you, that if you want to import a function or some code from another file, you have to type this command, this code, const express equals to require. So here I have imported this Express code in the main code of Express that helps us to write backend servers. So that's what I have done. I've imported this code from the Express file. Wherever it is somewhere in this node modules. I've imported that. Now I'm going to call this it's something like a function. This Express code that I have imported is something like a function. It's the same that I have wrote earlier. I don't know what it is, but it's something a function that I have to call. So after I call that function and assign that value to this app variable, I can now as I was talking about that event driven property of Node.js. So here we can see it app.listen. So what it does is that it listens on this port. By listening, I mean is that it kinds of waits for a request from the client. So every request is going to be an event on which this app, this Express code is going to react. So yeah, so this is an example of a simple server that I've created. This app.listen kinds of listens on this port 3000 for incoming request, and once it starts listening, it's going to run this code. This here is an example of callback function. It is simply a function that we have passed to another function, which is listen. Okay, so listen is a function to which we have passed this callback function, and what this function does is that it logs server started on 3000. So once this Express has set up everything, it calls this function and it prints this statement. So this is an example of a simple backend server. Now every request that is sent from a client to a backend is of is of few types. For example, we have get request, post, patch, put, and delete. There are a lot more type of request, but we are going to only see how get and post request work. So for example, if I want to listen to get request from the client, so here I have only started to listen on this port, which means that the backend server is available on this port. So it's listening for request, but what type of request that I haven't I haven't coded that part here. So I'm going to listen to get request. Okay, so app.get, it starts listening for get request on this URL subdomain. So by slash I mean is that since this server was running on 3000, so the URL for on which it's going to listen for get request is localhost 3000 slash. So this is the URL that it will be listening for get request on this URL. Okay, and this is also a callback function which has this request and response as parameters. So once this app Express starts listening for get request on this URL, it's going to execute this function. Now this request and response variables are used in order to receive the request from the like it kinds of gives you the data that the client wants to send and the response that you want to send. So the request will be containing all the data that the client has sent to you, and in response you will send the data as a response to that client. Like for example, if the client wants to fetch the top 10 users from Spotify's database, so you're going to fetch that information from Spotify and send it in the response variable. So like for now, all I'm going to do is that I'm going to send like this response variable has a function in which I'm going to send only hello world. Okay, so I'm not like doing anything advanced. All I'm doing is that I'm sending hello world back to the client which has made a get request on this URL. So every time you change the code, you have to restart the server, but you have something a library called Nodemon for this, which kind of automatically restarts your server. So yeah, say like when I type this URL in the browser, I've made a get request to this URL. Okay, like having this slash or not won't make a difference. It's the same thing. So I made a get request to this URL, and since I have sent hello world from the backend, it was printed here. You can even send HTML from here. So, yeah, it was just of h3 type. The tag was added to this line. So this is an example of a simple GET request that you can implement on a backend server using Express. Now, for example, so here I'll show you an example of a post request. So here I'm using this. It's an extension for VS Code. It's called REST client, and I'm using it in order to make a post request to this URL, which is localhost 3000. And here I've also written this code in order to how it's going to handle this post request. So all it does is that it kinds of like prints the value present in the body. So what body is? Every post request in every post request you can send a much some extra information in the body, like you can send JSON data or something like that, or you can even send a file. So here I'm sending this object in the body of the request which has this username set to hello. So all I'm doing here is that I am printing this body the value of the username. So now if I so here we are receiving this error because like in order to kind of accept a post request, you have to write some extra code in this Express, which is you just have to add this line in the starting of this JSON. So you just have to add this line in the starting of this, of your app, and it will help you accept post request in addition to get request. You have to add this line. Without this, it won't work. Yeah. So here we have we have print the username that was sent along with the post request, and if I change this to something else here, we have received world as the username. We can also send like data along with after this post request was processed. So in order to send data back to the client after you're done processing with the request, you have to use this response. Here we have used the send function in order to send this this line or the HTML code that we wanted. But you have to but if you want to send JSON data, JSON is JavaScript object notation. It's simply like an object which the web browser or the internet understands. So it's nothing fancy, it's simply an object. So here we are sending back an object which is a property message, and it is set to done. So now here if I made this request, I have received this response from the backend. So in the same way, you can also define other functions or anything like that, like any type of request. You can also define delete request or put request, anything you want, by just using this app dot and the name of the request that you want to define. And now there's also something called as a middleware in Express. So what a middleware is, that it's a simple function that we put between the exception of a request and before we start processing it. For example, I want to okay. So for that, I create the function. So like what I've done here is that I have replaced this app.get and app.post with app.use. So what app.use does is that it kinds of accepts every type of request. It won't be accepting just like get or post request. If a subdomain is mentioned here, it will accept every type of request that comes to this URL. So it will accept get, post, delete, put, anything like every type of request. So now before I start processing a request, I want to check if this request is of post type or not. So for that, I have created this middleware function. This middleware function comes between this like after the request gets accepted by Express and before we start processing it. So here what I can do is that I can check method. Okay. So like if the type of request is a post request, then I let like everything after this middleware function to be executed, or else yeah. So what is next function is that if you want this code like this request to be processed further, you can call this next function, and this same request will be passed from this middleware function to this callback function that we have defined here. Or else you can simply return from here that this is an invalid type of request. Like if it's not a post request, it's an invalid type of request, and you can't we can't process it. So now if I make a post request to this backend server, I've received this message done, which means that this request was accepted by the backend server. And for example, and now if I make a get request to the same backend, I will receive this message invalid type of request. So this middleware function, what it did was that it checked this request. If it was a post request, then only it let it be processed further, or else it returned a error message that this was not a valid type of request and we can't process it further. So this is a simple example of ExpressJs like backend server. You can do much more than this. You can install other libraries. For example, I've only used this Express library. You can use other libraries that can help you talk with a database and process data and pass it to the front end. So for example, if here after a post request is made, right, data. Yeah, for example, this is just a dummy data that I want to send back to the client. So yeah, so yeah, I received the data from the backend. It can be anything. Like I've just included the dummy data, but you can have you can fetch this data from the database and then send it to the client. So you can do this. And if for example I want to check if only if the username is set to world, then only I will process this data, or else I will send back an error. So as I showed you here, that we can access the body that was sent with the request. So what I'll do is that if request.body.username equals to 1. Yeah, so only if the username is set to world, then only I will pass that send back the data, or else I'll send that the username mentioned was invalid. So yeah, I you see as you saw, nothing changed. But if I change this capital W to small w, and now if I make the request, then I will receive this message that it was an invalid username. So this is how you can even implement authentication, something like that, in your backend server. And that's pretty much about the introduction to ExpressJS. Uh, yeah. So ExpressJS, it's just like I've written something on it. It's a library for Node.js which helps us to write lesser code to create APIs. And yeah, so this is all the all the variables that are available that we get from the client. For example, I use the request.method variable to find out what was the type of the request. We also have the base URL. I also use this body variable to access the body that was sent with the request. And you have the request.ip, IPs, the original URL, and things like these. which you can access about which you can use in order to find out more about the client which is making the request. And yeah, that's pretty much from from my side. I hope you guys enjoyed this session and you learned something from this session. Thank you.
If anybody has any doubts, they can ask. I guess there aren't any. So I guess we can stop the recording now and start with our quiz.